Hey everyone, Rich Gibbons here, Executive Director of SWMLS, and today I want to go through some of the information available for you for the NAR proposed settlement that came out on Friday, March 15th. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to start off by giving you some resources that are available to you so you can get the facts about what's going on with the settlement. I'm going to cover some of the high-level summary of what's going on with the settlement, and then I'm going to wrap up with what you should be doing about it. So to start with, I want to give everybody the this is the blog that we sent out that GAR sent out to everybody on the day it happened on Friday, and it has some basic information for you. We also have a link to the press release, some of the key terms, a link to the fact sheet, a link to the FAQs, and then a link to a website called the facts.realtor, and that's going to be your real resource for this. And because that's where you can find all this information. I'm going to be going over the fact sheet and the FAQs here in a bit, but facts.realtor is a website you can go to where you can sign in with your NAR ID, and I just want to point out that it's literally www.facts.realtor. That's it. No .com, no .org, nothing else. Facts.realtor, and that'll take you to this website. And on this website, you have a lot of different good resources. So first off, you have the press release. There's a great video here by NAR President Kevin Sears and Chief Legal Officer Katie Johnson. Highly recommend watching that in addition to the video you're watching now, of course. You have links to the fact sheet and the Q&A that we linked you in the blog. But this is where you can also get the legal documentation of the settlement itself. So you can actually go in and read it. And rather than a lot of the back and forth and speculating that's going on out there, you can actually read it there for yourself. And this is a good place to stop and remind people that this video is not legal advice. And I also want to say that one of the things I'm not going to be doing in this video is speculating on exactly how the logistics of all this is going to work. First off, because that's an exercise in folly, because this isn't even an approved settlement yet. So we don't know that this is exactly what it's going to say. Second off, there are groups that are going to be handling that kind of information. NMAR, Ashley Strauss Martin with the Forms Committee is going to be dealing with, updating any of the forms that need to happen in order to make this a smooth process. Here at the MLS, you have your board of directors, and at the association, you have your board of directors and the committees underneath them that are going to work all this out. So one of my first messages to people, which I'll get into a little more later, is don't sit here and try to figure out the logistics right now. I'll talk to you about what you should be doing a little bit later. But short version is, right now, this is not legal advice. But if you want to take the settlement agreement and bring it to your own legal counsel to get into that speculation or what you should be doing next, that's where you can get that information. So the next thing I want to do is I want to dig into the documents that are available here a little bit. So the first one is the settlement fact sheet. And what I like about the settlement fact sheet is it goes through and says, okay, this is the point, and then it lists out what the implications are. So for example, we're going to come down here under practice changes, and it tells you what those changes are, and then says what the implications are for members, what the implications are for buyer and sellers, so on and so forth. So that's a really good document to go to look at your specific section and see what matters to you. So just to dig into that a little bit more, one of the changes is that cooperative compensation is no longer going to be advertised through the MLS. So the implication for members to that is that there will continue to be many ways in which buyer brokers could be compensated. So right here, there will continue to be many ways that you could be compensated, including through members off the MLS, but using the MLS to communicate the compensation are no longer an option. So, some of the different ways that you could still be paid is fixed fee commission paid directly by consumers, a concession from the seller, a portion of the listing broker's compensation. There are a lot of different ways that this can still happen. The change that's happening is that you're no longer allowed to communicate the offer of compensation through the MLS. And I'll also get into the value proposition of the MLS a little bit later. The second part of this is that there is a new rule that MLS participants acting for buyers are required to enter into new written agreements with their buyers before touring a home. And I know I just said new rule, but again, keep in mind, this settlement has not been approved. Assuming it is approved, they are expecting that change to go into effect mid-July 2024, not right now. So you have some time to think through this. the forms committee has some time to make changes to those forms. And just in general, this is a get ready, but it's not absolutely changing the way things are right this minute. So that's the 2 practice changes that are happening. The other one I want to talk about, and for that I'm actually going to jump over to the Q&A, is the actual money part of the settlement of this. So the settlement is that NAR is going to pay $418 million over a 4-year period in order to settle this case, and it releases from liability all state and local realtor associations, all association-owned MLSs, such as Southwest MLS, and all brokerages that have a NAR member as their principal whose residential transaction volume was $2 billion or below. So anybody who's in any of those categories is released from liability under this nationwide settlement. For the brokerages that are over $2 billion, there is a mechanism built into the settlement where they are able to pay their own amount and implement the things that were agreed to upon in the settlement, and then they can be released from liability as well. Of course, a very important part of this settlement is that NAR is not admitting that any of the plaintiff's allegations are true and does continue to deny any wrongdoing in connection with the cooperative compensation model rule. So that's a place where you can come in here and read more information on that and these FAQs, which is another one of those documents that was linked for you in the blog and, of course, on facts.realtor as well. And then finally, the settlement agreement itself. I wanted to show you on this. If you want to look at the practice changes and get the actual verbiage of what the settlement says, those start on page 27 through 30. That is the section that focuses on the practice changes themselves, as well as giving more information about what is out there. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about what this means. One example one analogy that I heard that was pretty good is that, say you're trying to get from here to, I don't know, we'll say Dallas. On the way to Dallas, there's a couple of different routes you can get there, so right now, you have the shortest route, and let's say that route takes, I have any idea how long it takes to get from Dallas to here, but 8 hours, I think. But now there's going to be a little bit different route, and that route is still going to get to Dallas. That route is still going to get there, but now it's going to take 9 hours instead. It's just a little bit of a different route to get there is all that's happening. So the message here is that, if you take any economics course and you look at the law of supply and demand, the number one rule of marketing is that if the market gets what the market wants, the market is willing to pay for it, right? So what's changing here is not if a realtor will be paid. There have been many surveys that consumers want a trusted guide to walk them through the most complicated and largest purchase transaction of their lives. That is not changing. The only thing that's changing is how a realtor gets paid. Again, if is not changing. How is what's changing. So that's where my messaging has been, don't focus on that too much. Yes, there's going to be more forms involved. The number might end up in a different spot on the closing statement. But if realtors really prove their value and are able to articulate their value proposition to consumers, then there's not going to be much of a difference here, because consumers are willing to pay for that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to show you some tools that NAR has put out to help you talk about that value proposition, and then also give you some of the value proposition of the MLS as well. So popping back over here, the next thing I want to talk about is competition.realtor. And same as with facts.realtor before, it is just competition.realtor, and that's going to be linked down in the description for you as well. So competition.realtor is the easy thing to remember. The link is going to have the nar.realtor/competition in real estate is what the name of the webpage is. But on this page, there's a couple different things. There's a couple different things available for you. So first off, there's some consumer testimonials that were posted back in October that are actual consumers talking about the experience they had with a realtor. Then down here, the three things I want to talk about is the 179 ways agents who are realtors are worth every penny in their compensation. 105 more ways agents who are realtors are worth every penny of their compensation. And then there's local MLS broker marketplaces in action. So the 179 ways agents who are realtors are worth every penny of their compensation is they went through and broke down all 179 steps it takes for a realtor to work through, again, the largest and most complicated transaction most people are going to make in their lives. So you can utilize this to really help talk about your value proposition and why you are so important as part of the transaction. The 105 more ways is a very similar thing, but this focuses on the buyer side of the transaction. And it focuses on all the different ways that a buyer broker contributes to a transaction to help navigate a buyer through that. So through these two things, one way that you might look at the way things are going into the future is, right now, if you're going to do a listing presentation, you have information about the listing and how you're going to market the listing and some important information about the listing. So I can foresee a place where we move into a future where you have a buyer presentation. So here is my expertise on the market. Here's what I know about the area you're looking in and things like that. So that's one place that you might start thinking about. You have kind of two different value propositions here of how you help people move through this market. Now, the other thing to talk about is the MLS's value proposition. I've seen some people erroneously state that the compensation is the foundation of the MLS, but it's really not. Anybody who's heard me speak in the last 3 or 4 years knows that the foundation of the MLS is aggregation, compliance, and syndication. So aggregation, we get all the data together for all of the available homes in a market into one spot. So that's right here talking about the largest database of available homes, and without the MLS, you have no centralized source. Compliance. The real foundation of the MLS and what's most important to you and your business as the MLS is that we have 4,500 people that have all agreed to abide by the same rule set. So we have compliance that makes sure, look, when this property is closed, it actually comes off the market. In other areas outside of the U.S. and Canada that don't have an MLS, the way they work on those areas is there's a website that charges the agent, their listing broker, per listing per month to advertise their listing on their website. They don't have compliance. They don't have rules. They don't have anything that makes sure that the property is actually actively available for sale. So if it's a website that's generating a lot of good leads for that agent, they might keep it up on there long after the property is sold. So it creates where you have these different websites where not only are you having to go to different websites to see the full inventory, but you don't even know if it's active inventory. So without that compliance piece of the MLS, this whole thing falls apart. And that is why the rest of the world outside of the US and Canada is trying to copy us. There are MLSs launching in Egypt, in Central America, in Hungary, in Paris, that are trying to copy the American model because we are able to get that central database of information for you. And then, of course, after we aggregate the data and then we compile the data, we also syndicate it. So we're also responsible for every single website across the internet that has local data. Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com, Trulia, all these different portal websites don't exist without MLS data. Now, this is a great resource that NAR has put out, that's local broker marketplaces in action. I also want to point out, we actually have this same thing printed out on a nice poster, with Southwest MLS at the top, talking about the MLS system in action. We have these printed as a poster available for you to pick up here. So if you want to come pick up one of these and go hang it in your brokerage, come on in. We have them available. I probably have 170 of them sitting in my office here. So that is the value of the MLS and why we go so much further beyond what the portals offer. So that's a couple different resources you have as far as, trying to talk about value propositions. So just kind of a final word on what you should be doing right now. So let's go back to what you shouldn't be doing. Don't get into hand-wringing and trying to figure out the logistics and exactly what's going to look like and what about this and what about that, and then you have this edge case, and right now that is an exercise in folly. That's not going to accomplish anything for you. This settlement is not approved. Over the next 4 to 5 months, it'd be 4 months if NAR actually hits that mid-July like they talk about in the settlement FAQs. There's going to be a lot of developments. Organizations like NAR, SWMLS, and RESO are going to be getting their heads together to figure out how we move forward with this in the industry. This is why you have associations. This is why trade associations exist, is to figure out these kind of changes in the industry and get them out in a way that works for everybody. Again, I talked about New Mexico Association of Realtors earlier. The Forms Committee and Ashley Strauss Martin are probably already furiously at work trying to figure out what this is going to look like, what kind of changes need to happen, how are we moving forward on this. It's their job to worry about this stuff. As I mentioned in my video on Friday when this came out, your board of directors at both GAR and Southwest MLS have prepared for this. We've already had these discussions. We're already ready to go once the details come out on the best way to move forward. That's why we exist for you, so you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. So what you should be doing right now is getting used to buyer-broker agreements. That is something that NAR has been advocating for decades now. And regardless of how this settlement comes out, I would expect to see that remain as a requirement. Be ready to talk about your value proposition. Make sure you know what your value proposition is and utilize these resources to help talk about that. Transparency. Everything in this settlement is about consumer transparency. So regardless, again, of whether this settlement is approved or not, the ability to articulate your value and talk about how much you are paid with consumers on both sides of the transaction is going to be central to how we move forward. So, negotiation has always been a skill that is very important for realtors. It's now not just important, it is now table stakes. It is the bare minimum of what you should know and be willing to do in order to remain a successful realtor. And this is, again, something I talk about constantly. Every single one of you are a small little micro business. Treat it like one. The people who treat their business like a business and the people who are able to pick up the skills necessary to move forward are the ones who are going to survive. The ones who don't treat their business like a business and are going to have a much harder time. So, value proposition, articulate your value, transparency to consumers, treat your business like a business. If these 4 things sound familiar, it's because it's the same exact 4 things you should have already been doing. Again, the route to get to that closing statement might change. The line on the closing statement might change, but but how or if you were paid is not. So again, guys, just utilize these resources. Please make sure you're paying attention to official sources. There is a lot of podcasts and blogs out there that are just spouting nonsense, not to mention what the national media is spouting right now. And just don't get caught up in it. Focus on your business. Focus on those 4 things. And everything's gonna work out just fine in this. So of course, if you guys have questions, you can reach out down here at the bottom, support at SWMLS.com or 505-843-8833. Happy to answer more questions about this. But again, we're not going to get into speculating about this specific situation or this specific example because there's a lot of stuff left to figure out. But just let us worry about that. Focus on your business, and everything's going to be just fine. So. Thank you all for watching. Again, reach out to those resources, keep an eye on official sources, and we'll keep getting more information for you as it comes. Thanks. Have a great day.